think. Maybe not. Okay, so in the last stream, Duncan has been focusing on implementing a window, and I want to show a bit more about things you can do in IDA to make it easier to work with structures and like kind of have a bit a better idea on like how structures are used before doing the like implementation. So I have an IDA database which should be fresh, and I'm going to load the script file from the OpenLoco um, decompilation tools repository. Um, Zip that one. And if you look at the top bar, like yeah, also like a lot more um, areas have been marked as explored as opposed to like the default unexplored. So like there's these struct lists that are used to like instead of like raw addresses. And if you press X, you can see all the places where these addresses have been used so far or are being accessed. What I wanted to look at today was the news window. And for reference, the window I'm talking about is building. Oh, wait, I should start with an exist. Oh, I should start with a save. Okay, so this is the messages window, and if you click on one of these items, it shows up like a newspaper excerpt, which also gets used as an alert when things happen. So we have an HTML dump of all the existing windows. And if we go to like the window type definition, there should already be yes, there's already a definition for the news window being 36. And if we just look for 36, the window is still unnamed in this version, but this HTML was generated probably over a year ago, so that's why it doesn't have all the windows named. So we see that there are multiple versions, like multiple widgets lists for this window. There is one at hexadecimal 508 CFO, then one at 508 C8C, and one at 508 D54. The bottom one is used for the ticker style alerts, which I can show as well. I think at least. No, I don't think you can access like show those on demand, but like when something happens, it shows up in the bottom right area over the clock. Change everything to a ticker message. I hope someone shows up, but it doesn't seem to be like that. Oh, yeah, this is the ticker message that appears. So we know at what addresses those widget lists are. So if we copy an address and then go to IDA and press the G button, we can go immediately to an address. And you see here it's called UI News Widgets 2. And above it is widgets 0, and above that is widgets 1 at C8C and CFO, CFO and C8C. So if we press X, we can see that this widget definition is only used in one function. This one is also only used in one function, and this one is also used in one function. So this function will be responsible for opening the news item. Okay, so if I go to this the function declaration and then press N, I can change the name, which is just going to make it easier like when navigating. So if we changed it to news window open, um, that is called on a, like if pressing X again, that window is opened. Oh, wait, if I make this one smaller, you should be able to see the keys I'm pressing. And then closing this one to take a bit less CPU. Okay, so if you press X, all the references to this function will open. So one of those is in UI messages event one scroll mouse down, which is just the news list we just saw. That will probably be the on click event for all the list items. And the other functions we don't know yet what they will be coming from. Like you can just look at it and like try to move up a bit to see what's going on. See, there is one function is apparently called by toggle last announcement, which I assume will be like a keyboard shortcut. Yeah, it's in toggle last announcements, and that is one of the keyboard shortcuts. So you can work your way up to have an idea of where it's coming from. And yeah, you can see that this function, like 428 E47, calls the news window open. It even calls it 2 times. And then this function also opens it. Usually the functions that are related are also close together in the binary itself, which likely is a result from them all like being in the same assembly file. So the order of the function does show a bit of the um, like the way the original code was structured. Okay, what we see here is that immediately is that DL is not used and AX is used. So like when this window is opened, it should be like something before that will set AX to something. And you see here that that's happening. And if you go to another reference, it is also AX is also calculated probably. Yeah, by the division function. Like the division function outputs the result into AX. So you know where the variables are coming from. But to make it easier, or like to make it more clear for other people that there is an argument in AX, you can specify it as in the function definition. If you press Y and change it to void underscore underscore user call, then you see that the C definition will start showing up above the function. And if you press Y again, we will have one parameter that we know of, being an int16 since AX is 16 bits long. Argument 1, and if we use this syntax like at, then pointy brackets, and then the register name in combination with the user call attribute, it will know that it's about that it uses AX to pass that register. And we should, yeah, it will, like when you go back to the definitions, it will show the name of the argument on the place where the register is written to. So it can be helpful to use that as a way to make it clear where data is coming from. Like here we can see that EAX is being popped, and just a bit before that it's pushed. So we know that the EAX that's like at this state will be used here again for the news window open function. Anyhow, we expect that the news will be stored in some kind of structure, and usually it's pretty common to see Sawyer either shifting a value to the left a number of times to match the size of the structure, and otherwise he will usually multiply to match the structure size. And since we see a multiply here, and this D4 hexadecimal is likely going to be the, someone sending a message on, no. This D4 is likely being the size of the struct, especially since it's added to an offset, which is not really used otherwise, because otherwise there would be more of these references to it. So we'll just go ahead and make a struct of D4 bytes long. In order to do that, we go to the Structures tab and then edit, add struct type. We'll just call it news item underscore T. And you see that the default size is 0. Now, we saw that the size of the struct should probably be D4. Now, the easiest way I've found so far is to to set the size of the struct is to press D to add a byte member, then press asterisk to make that into an array of the size -1. So D3 in this case, and then add another byte afterwards. And the reason that I just make 2 members is that you can easily undefine this member while still keeping that one. So if you press U, it will delete the field, but it will still take up the space that it used to. So now we have an empty struct that will take up D4 bytes, but still, we can add members to it more easily now. So if we press T here, and if we sort by representation should work. if you press size, it will show that D4 is the value of the news item size. So it will use AX, move it to EDI, and then multiply that by the size of news item, and then add that to an offset. So this offset will be a news item, and it's gonna be a list because it does multiply it by the index. So if we press no. Yes, if we press Alt Q, and we can select the same news item structure that will set this offset to be one news item. And then if you press asterisk to make an array, it will put in a default value based on the number of addresses that are unused. So basically, there should be the current referenced addresses have space for 199 news items, and it tends to be pretty correct. Like the default value usually is pretty close. And you see there is here like one address is referenced, and then a lot of space is still empty. So basically, it will say you can fit this many news items in the space below that's not referenced. Okay, so EDI here will be the address of a news item. And you can see here that at EDI plus 0CH, sorry, C8, it's reading a word pointer. So if we go to structures and we are still in the news item structure, we can go to C8 on the left side in the address list. And if we just press D here, we add a field. And if you press D again, like the first time you press D, it will show up. It will add a byte field. The second time you press D, it will change it into a word field, which is 16 bits long. And the third time you press it, it will be a 32-bit field. And then it will swap back to byte again. So we press twice to make it a word field, and then if we just click here and press T again, you can see that the offset does show up already. So we don't know what the field is yet, but we do know that it's a word wide and that it's being used in the news item. So if we click EDI, we will see the other usages of it. For example, here we can see it using C7, which will be 1 byte because it's moved into a byte size register. So if we go to, if we would press T now, it will still have the news item struct selected because that's the last struct we used. But if we press OK, we see that as opposed to this one where it shows a field already, this just says news item plus 078 plus C7 hexadecimal. So we still need to go to the structures and add a field to that. If we go back now, it immediately switched to using that field. Okay, so we see here that AL, which is loaded from C7, is compared to the player company ID. So we can be pretty sure that because it compares to the company ID, this will be a company ID as well. So if we double click this field, we will automatically be transported to the definition. And if we press N now, we can change the field. And now we see that we named it company ID because it's probably a company ID, and there's a lot of guessing in this process. as you can see by some of the structs that are already in the game, and like you should not believe that everything is 100% true. There's also you always have to deal with limited knowledge and making guesses that makes most sense. Okay, so here EDI is used again, but it's field C8, which we've already defined, so that's fine. And then there are any other plays? Yeah, here C7 is used again. And that that's it. Okay, so we know that some index is passed into this function.
There's also reference of EDI, just field 0.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is for here you can see that yeah, it moves EBX into like the value of byte pointer EDI to EBX. So if we press T here, um, this one will read the first field, so like EDI plus 0, and IDA doesn't always like to show the 0 field. But we do know that it will be a byte pointer, so if we just press D once, it should, yeah, it does show the field, and it removes the byte pointer because that's indicated by the field itself. Um, is there another one of those? Does not look like it. Is there, we see, yeah, here we can see that field 0 is loaded into EBX, and then its EBX is then used as the index into some array. But we don't really know what 0 is so far, so we'll just leave it as field 0. If we go back to AX, the argument for the function, we know that it's some kind of index to a news item. So if we just press Y again, we can rename argument 1 to news item index. And that's just for our sake for when we come back to this function, so we know what is the argument that is passed. And if we click on it, we can follow AX again, and we see that AX is written to a word here. So since we know that AX is not modified between the entrance of the function and here, we can pretty safely say that this word will also be the um, the news item index for the active news window. And if we press X, we see that there is like a number of places where it's being used. So even if it's not only used in this function, naming it will make it easier for implementing other windows that will use the same address. So if we press N here, we also like change the name of the variable without going to the definition first. Um, just calling it active news item index. Okay, so we know that also this structure, we know that it's a list of news items, which make, and like since like related data usually is found together, like it makes sense that the active news item is very close to the list of news items. Okay, if you press X here, it will show us all the windows that you use the news items. And this is a lot, but mm, yeah, just let us. I need to start somewhere. Um, well, we can go to the draw scroll because we know that will like try to get some sort of message of the structure. So here you can see some AX being multiplied by D4 again, which, as we know, is the size of the news item. Then it's added to the news item's offset, and then it's stored. Okay. Um, Here EBP plus one. So EBP still is a pointer to a news item here. It gets the address from the first byte and loads that address into EBP. Um, and this is like a very short loop. Usually these loops are pretty often used to if it's like text or something. So it might be text. We know that this will be some sort of byte sequence. Like it's loading the address and like that checks a byte, moves it into another string, and then increments the pointer. So this part just copies um, this byte array into this byte array, which is a string buffer.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's
it looks like a strcpy function, I guess,
Yeah,
something like that.
and
So
like
until the end of
you'll
the
find those like snippets of like short things that like always the same not operands instructions that were probably macros we assume, and you'll like the more you decompile the more you get an eye for them and see, and you'll think less about them and just say, oh yes, this is a string copy function. Okay, now so we've checked one of those definitions, not definitions, the what is it? One of the uses of the array. And if we go to EBP again, we see that like it's pushed here, and then like EBP is overridden by the address of the string. But if we go down a bit, we can see we can search for a location where EBP is popped again. Here it's pushed and then it's popped. Oh, here EBP is popped again. Sorry. So at this point, EBP points to the news item again, but here since it's pushed here, um, usually like some other function is using it, and that's why it's being pushed and popped later. But if we go here, EBP should still be pointing to a news item. So if we check D0 should still be within the size of the structure, which is D4. So D0 will be some kind of variable, a 32-bit variable because it uses a move instruction and it moves into EAX. Like if it's a smaller size moved into a bigger register, it will either use a move ZX instruction, so move 0 extent, or a move SX instruction, so a move sign extent. So we see field D0 is being used, and here you can see it's a D word pointer. So we because the third time we press the D, it will wants to expand this field into a 32-bit field, but at the moment it can't because this field is in the way. So that's why it's giving a warning. Yeah, like it's using D0, putting it in the common format args, then putting some kind of number in the format args, but we don't really care about that yet. let's see. Yeah, so basically by going through these offsets, it becomes a bit easier to like have an idea on what the struct will contain. Like we know that oop, if we go to the structure, like this field one will be some kind of array of bytes. Like we could just like press star and make it a byte array for now. Like we don't know the exact length yet, but we can always shorten it again. So it doesn't really matter to know the exact struct while you're working on it. It will just it's nice to have an idea of what you're working on. Okay, so there are more multiple offsets that are being added. Um, there are multiple instances where an offset is being added. So these will also be all working with news items.
You know that D0? That's a date.
Is that already known?
Well, I just went and looked up what that common format args, the next argument was, and it's a string, and then it's popping a date off the stack of the common format args. So
Oh, okay. So I'm guessing this is a string 1429 is a date.
yeah, that's asking for a date for the next argument.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So the common format arg stuff is pretty helpful also for figuring out what type of variables are. Like if we see like here it's string 1429. If we go to our code base and open the English strings file, um, just search for 1429. It does. It switches to a small font and then uses a date. So as Duncan said, like field D0 probably is a date. So the thing is you try to piece together like small different bits of information to have an idea of um, what structure members are. Knowing it before doing the decompiling helps you in that you have more of an idea of what is going on before you're writing the code. So the code you see can make a bit more sense when you have an idea of what it is that you're working with. Um, yeah. So now I want to show another way to find uses of a struct, and that is by size. Like if we press H again, we can see like this struct was size D4, and especially the bigger structs tend to all be different sizes. So another way of identifying structs that are used is by size. And then if we go to edit, no, sorry, if we go to search and then immediate value, if we search by value D4, at the top you can see everywhere that it is searching. We can see a lot of times where, like if we sort by instruction, it makes it a bit easier. There are places where D4 is added, and usually those additions don't really mean that it's a struct size. It's not always, but those usually just do additions usually have something to do with um, often they have to do with like string or image IDs. Anyhow, we see that a lot of places use multiplication of D4. And yeah, we found one where it's multiplying by D4 and then adding news items. So if you like now we know that that list contains news items, but if we didn't, like the D4 is also a good indication of um, where a struct is being used. And this function seems to open a news window. Yeah, it seems to also like window vehicle create, company window, open company. I think this function might have something to do with like handling um, news items being clicked. And I think this is one of the examples where the graph view is not necessarily helpful since it's just a mess. Yeah. So we see that like if you press spacebar, you can switch to like assembly view and the graph view, which is helpful in a lot of cases. Like here, you can see that this is just from the part of the mouse up events on news widgets. So it is indeed has to do with the on click. Here we see EBP, which is a news item, and uses CH, which we have already defined. So it's setting is to a 1, but we don't know what CH is yet. So we can't really do anything with that. Um,
Just a question. I see this move ZX EBP, and then it's comparing just the BP. So can you explain why is that? So the first one is a 32-bit, and the second is 16-bit, right?
yes, I don't know. I have no idea why it does that. I'm I'm not, I'm not sure. Can you move direct, Duncan? Do you know that? Can you move to BP?
The reason they've done a move zero extend on that one will be because they're indexing into an array later on, so we need to clear out
Oh yeah,
the top of the 32-bit register.
yeah. Later on, they're multiplying with it, so that's the reason. And Sawyer tends to use like -0, -0, um, -1. If you press underscore, by the way, you can change the signness of a variable. Tends to use -1 as the meaning for like something is not selected or like null.
Okay, so it's basically loading only 16-bit, but with extension to the 32-bit register, right?
Yeah, and the
Yes.
extension's just so that you can index into the array correctly later on.
Right. Okay, I understand now. That makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just combining a couple of things at once. Just that's what he likes to do.
Yeah, this is one of the things that the more you do it, the more you kind of start to ignore these kind of things. Like the more you're used to it, the less you're surprised by it.
Yeah. Of course,
Um,
I did a long time ago assembly, so I don't know even this move ZX that was not in a 16-bit era, I think.
Probably didn't need it then, did you? I
Not
don't know.
really. No. I didn't do much 32-bit assembly, so yeah,
Okay.
I did in a very
I don't
old
think a
time.
lot of people did.
Yeah, I did it in a very old time, so
Anyhow, like the move ZX and move SX instructions can be really useful for identifying and seeing if a variable is signed or not, because for most of the time we have no idea whether a variable is meant to be signed or not.
okay.
Um,
So the move SX is doing with a signed extension, right? So if it's
yes,
if the low byte is, let's say, or the low word, let's say, is FFFF, then it will do also on a higher word,
yeah,
right? If I understand correctly.
But like for this one, it doesn't really matter. Like, sure, like he likes to Sawyer likes to use hexadecimal FFF as negative or like as null value. So he could have like done a move sign extent to EBP and then compare the entire EBP to -1 as well. But it doesn't really
No,
matter
no,
because then
yeah.
like it jumps out again if it's -1
On the
and the
other
index.
side, for -1 only for 16-bit, it takes I guess 2 bytes less on a instruction
Yeah,
opcode, so that makes sense to do it this way.
yeah, and this way it's like since it like it's the array will only be 200 items long. So, but technically by doing this, he could have uh, 0 FFF -1. How many? 65,000 value news items. Seems a bit excessive. Um, anyhow, so that is one of the ways to find uses of structures. Um, Duncan, is there anything other useful that I could explain?
Um, no, I think that's quite useful. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, Chris Sawyer, he likes to have his like, if there's a string inside a structure, it'll be there's a normal size that he makes them. Um, you could probably work out what it is with that structure. Um,
Yeah, like currently it's like set to 198, and that doesn't seem like a logical size he would use.
no, no, but I don't know. I haven't really played around too much with locomotion, so I don't know too much on that.
Like I'm get like one of these functions will probably like fill the news items with text.
Hmm.
Like these ones are like they open the window. These ones are more about showing it. So I'm guessing like the maybe the earlier windows will show it. Okay, like here we'll hear it.
What about the one which is returning a news item for the caller to fill in the information, most likely.
Yeah.
That's what.
Oh yeah. Here we can. Oh yeah. This is like what Duncan said about the date. Like here we can see that ESI is filled with the offset to news items, and then it is uh, loads some variable into EAX and then adds EAX to the date and then compares it to the current date. So more proof that that this field is indeed a date. And this is also one of the places where adding it does make sense. So it just loops over all news items. So it first loads ESI with the offset to the first news item, and at the end of the loop adds the size of a news item to ESI, and then goes on. So it will point to news item first to news item 0, then to news item 1, and so on. And it will use EBP as an index. Like it will start with probably like the size of it. We don't know yet. Might be 100, might be 200. And as long as that index in EBP is not 0, it will continue with the loop. So this will be news item count. And if we press X, we can see some other places where it's being used. Here is a comparison.
I think
So
looking at the increment would probably be quite useful. Oh yeah, yeah, comparison's also good. Yeah, a comparison. Never mind.
yeah, and if you press H here, like it uses a say number. So like it's still there's probably a maximum of 200 news items, meaning that like now we have like 199 news items. This probably is the pointer to the address of the very last news item. Yeah, ESI. He's comparing if ESI is equal to this address, so it will probably be a news item as well. Um,
It's just a bit odd that if that is the last news item, why aren't there more known offsets after that?
no, this will probably be the last
Oh,
news item.
actually, oh yeah. Sorry,
Like if we,
looking.
I
I'm
think,
looking
I
at the
think,
sides of that item. It's just
yeah,
when you look at it just like that, it's yeah, that'll be
I
fine.
think if we set this to 200, yeah, then like other data start showing up again.
Yeah.
So this is one of the parts where it's just there's a lot of guessing involved. Like you make educated guesses, but ultimately there will still be guesses. Um, oh yeah, this is another one of those copy loops, I think. Yeah, it will copy the entire structs in like using what is it 16-bit um in 16-bit steps. So it will ESI plus D4, so that will point to the next structure in the list is copied to the current structure in the list. Um, any other things that would be nice to know?
For example, how to save now what you created. So those, for example, active news item index or news items, and how to
Um,
save it back to the script.
yeah, back to the script. That's a good question. What I usually do is when I would load my database, and after I use the script, like the first time, I would choose file, produce file, and then dump database to IDC file. So I would basically call that before, and then, for example, change something, file, produce file, dump database to IDC file. Then after, okay, we need a better process for this. So let's see. So we have the after and the before file. And then what I would usually do is just compare those two. Ooh. This is one of the reasons why I don't keep I don't tend to share all my changes. It's just like a lot of effort. So basically, I would just make a diff and like manually copy over some of the changes I made.
Okay, so where is the difference now? I can't see on the screen.
I can't see either yet. It's still loading.
Oh, is it that big? Okay.
Yeah, it's like they are like 3 MB files.
You can try to do it in a command line. Maybe that will be
Oh,
faster.
yeah.
But okay.
Yeah, so here like one of the changes is like there is a variable created with the name news item count, and like in this one, I changed that to news item count 2. So I would basically like try to find these lines and like just manually open up the script and like add those. It's not a great process. I really am aware of that. So I would just like add a command for all the things that I did here, like that I see that have changed, and like a lot of those are not that interesting for other people. Like the problem is that the IDC thing, like it saves the entire state of the thing. So even if I um like if I change this representation to use binary instead of numerals, it will also save that stuff to the IDC, and that is the reason why we haven't like put the entire IDC online, because like the differences between after everything are just, there are so many differences that it becomes impossible like to merge the changes between them. So yeah,
Sure,
that's
of course.
how you would do like name things. And for structs, we have like a bit more complicated stuff.
So in this case, you put the change in a names.idc or where?
Yes, I will put the simple variables, like the news item count. I would just put those in names, and for
Okay.
the structures themselves, I would like look at this definition and then go to the structs file. Yeah, one of like if you go to the bottom of the file, like one of them is like in a GFX that will make like one of the graphics structures. I created like a number of functions that make it easier to create these structures in code.
I
Um,
actually made a pull request just today of a new struct,
oh
which
yeah, I
will
saw it.
take this form.
We could check that out. Mm,
It was actually my first time
oh,
ever doing it, but it seems to have worked. So
pull request. Yeah, we just like we have a function to make a struct that is like of a specific size, so you don't need to do the like creating a fake array to just like pad the struct, and we then added some functions that allow for like setting a variable at a specific address.
So for example, here, where is the size?
Like here, the size of the station T struct is hexadecimal 3D2,
Okay.
and then at offset 0, it will have a unsigned integer, like a 16-bit integer with the label name.
Okay. So for example, if this station, so let's say is a list, like with the news,
Ah,
you
that
have 200 elements in a news, for example. Where is that defined? I understand this.
that's not a disposition yet. We can look that up.
Okay.
This function just makes like the struct definition itself.
Yes.
But if we search in the tools, like the list will have already been there, since it's um, like we had the size of it before. Like this before Duncan did his pull request, it was just like purely a stubbed structure, just like only padding. So if we look for station T in the variables files, we have a function that has an address, a string that has the type in it with the count, and the name of the variable. So for our news item, I would just like basically I would copy this line, paste it here while working on it. So that would be local var, and then first the address, then it would be news item underscore t, and then the 200 to indicate the size of the list, underscore, and then the string with the name. So that's
Okay.
how I would add
So that's
the
in
list.
variables.idc. All right.
Yes. And I think it would be best if the like these ones would also just be in variables just for completeness sake. So instead of like only specifying the name in our RDC, like we would say U16 news item count and U16 active news item index. Because
So
everything that is not in this file basically relies on IDA parsing. So it's just like this is
relies on what?
on the way that IDA already parsed the binary.
Okay, right.
A lot of the names in that decompilation tools that's come from OpenRCT2, and
Yes.
they haven't used exactly the same names for everything, so it can be just slightly confusing.
Yeah, but it would be great, like if there's any confusion or anything, just like share your confusion so we know what to fix. Like the more people use something, the easier it becomes because people will find issues while using it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one more question. That's maybe more
Yeah.
complicated. Can you run this like the local exe?
Yeah.
Can you run from here and debug it, like trace line by line? Is it
Um,
possible?
think you can.
You can, but I've never found it work very well.
I'm on a Mac, so I'm very scared of like trying to run a window like a hacked like Windows-ish binary within this. So I've never tried it.
Yeah, I tried it on my one.
I like to use Ollie debug for that, but
Okay.
obviously you lose all
I
the
tried it in
information.
IDA, and that's it doesn't start. I don't know why. Let's try. So I guess use the green play button, right? Start a new process in debugger.
Oh, this one. Yeah, this it's even like disabled for me.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to run it on my one, so I guess that's the start. How you should start it, right? With the green play button.
Let's. I
You
think I
might
c- I c-
you might not be running it with the all of the DLL file and everything in the right position.
Well, if I try to run it, I get. Let's see. Okay, risk of unauthorized code execution. Fine. Yes. Okay. And I get this warning. Uh, create process failed. Access is denied. What does it mean?
Not too sure. As I said, you can use Ollie debug to run it. That definitely works because that's what I've done. Now, anyone watching a recording of this will now see me running it from Ollie debug.
I just tried like loading in the macOS binary in IDA, which does something. Use source level debug now. I have no idea if I even can run it.
Probably not on Mac, but well, I would expect here that on Windows I can run it, but it doesn't run in my case. So ideally, I would run, the some parts of the code, and I would debug what is happening, what values are coming in or something. I would like to try this thing.
Yeah, if you can get it to work, like please share like what you did. Like I'm sure it would be helpful for anyone using Windows.
Yeah, definitely. I will try to figure out something.
It's kind of weird that I don't like. I'm looking through the menus and I don't even have um
Well, my layout
like
is a bit different than yours, but I had it in this between those icons.
yeah, I have a play button there as well, but I can't like that one is grayed out for me.
Okay. I mean, I have it in a debugger main window, which you don't have at all, I think. I mean, up. You don't have a
Ah,
debugger.
okay. No, I don't see
I
anything about.
guess it's a bit different on a Mac. So I have view, debugger options. You don't have a debugger menu at all.
No,
So that's not there at all.
but yeah, I think it it could help at least when like viewing numbers, especially like maybe not necessarily for um like the window functions that we're mostly focusing on right now. But I do think like Duncan has been doing a lot on of the vehicle function and everything in OpenRCD, and I can imagine like for those kind of functions, it does help to see what kind of data you're working with.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it might help with everything, even in a news. If you see that what string is exactly copying and all those things, then you
Ah,
will
yeah,
understand that where is that
that is true. Yeah.
on a
Yeah,
screen or something.
I've used it with my the other debugger I use, and I've used it in cases where yeah I just walk through the code, the function which I'm doing, and like just today in fact I was going through a function and I was like, why on earth is that going into that part of it? And I had my if statement just the opposite way around, and it just
Mhm.
instantly told me that because yeah, there was no other way it could have got to that part of the function.
Yeah, that's why I would like to also run
I'll have a look to
some
see if I
tests.
can get it working on the IDA version.
If not, we can try on the other one, but maybe in some other session you can show me this,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
if it
I'll
will
do that.
not record
Oh
it.
yeah. I mean, Duncan, is Ollie Debug is that Windows only?
I don't really know. I'm not really too sure. See,
Well, it doesn't matter.
I've used it for quite a while because you can use it without installing anything. So if you're on a computer which you don't have access to the ability to install, you can always download that debugger, and then you can look at binaries, and you can work on them on computers which you don't have full access to.
Oh, okay.
I'll leave that to you to guess why I would need that.
University. No.
As I said, I'll leave it a mystery.
I think this looks kind of like the function that would create news items. I like to like even like functions when we're not even sure when what they're doing. I like to like just for my sake to just prepend like the thing that it's working with in the name, so I have like an idea of where the functions start. But yeah, I
You
think
can see in
that's
the left-hand pane, the function view, that this is quite near news window open.
yeah.
Telling you that it is related to news, and probably all of those subs in between this one and news window open are probably.
Yeah, and you can see even subs before it are also like using news items, news items. This sets the count to 0 and the active one to -1, so that will be like news in it or something. And this is starting to use other stuff. So we kind of know that like the news stuff starts with this. And it makes sense to put like an initialization function at the start of a file. So like the nice thing about debugging is that, or debugging about like looking at the assembly is that it does like despite it having no comments and everything, you can kind of see the intention behind it. Um,
Maybe
anything
I
else?
have one other question, but this is more about the C++ code. Would it be possible, for example, to kind of relocate a function? So, for example, I don't know, you can show something, and I would like to do a thing that basically it still jumps to that address, but I will jump somehow out, and we log kind of the values. So let's say if the input is a register or something, then I would log the registers and I jump back to the assembly code. So if that would be possible to relocate, for example, function to some new address and then inject to the old one or the original one.
Duncan, I think this is more
That
your area of expertise.
so how is that different from just hooking the function? You're wanting to be able to just jump to some arbitrary point.
If I hook up, then I can't call the same address back.
No, yeah.
So I would like to still run the original code, but before that I would like to log the output and input.
You wouldn't be able to do that because the hooking function will rewrite the in-memory
Yeah.
function. So unfortunately,
I think like the best approach for that usually is like finding the place where the function is called and implementing that, and then like call the original code and call your new code.
yeah, you could also, yeah, sometimes you can find that the function above it isn't isn't being used for anything important, so you can sort of be cheeky and destroy that function, and then that would jump into that one. You can do a couple of sneaky ways of trying to get that to work. You can also rewrite where it's getting called, but if you're gonna have to do that, you got to have a good reason because it's going to take quite a while. We don't have
Just I'm asking if we could develop something like that. So let's say you know that how big is some function.
Yeah, but the problem is that we don't really know that.
No, I mean from here the assembly code. So
Okay, yeah.
if I, for example, I would like to just exactly one function I would like to debug. You know that let's say who is it calling or what are the values are coming in. And
Yeah, I mean,
just
what you could do is you'd have to rewrite the calling functions. It wouldn't be terribly hard to create some sort of rewriting mechanism to do that, but
yeah,
it's not the easiest, and you'd have to specify every single calling function. But I think I could probably think of a way of doing that.
I mean I am thinking about let's say that a function is 100 bytes in a or you assume from this assembly code. So you see here the address that is coming from I don't know D8 something D8 until 1B, right? So you calculate how long is that, and I guess you could just copy this memory into some completely new unallocated space currently, right?
Yeah, I think like relative jumps would work, but the problem is like when it jumps out of the function in some cases.
Yeah, you'd have to find some space to destroy so that you could keep your relative jumps.
Well, the relative jumps are okay, I guess. You just copy it, and the absolute calls are still at the original addresses, so that shouldn't be also a problem, right?
Are they absolute calls?
I think calls are absolute.
A0 0. I don't.
It doesn't look like absolute.
No?
No.
Oh, okay,
No.
then that's a problem, right?
But I mean, there are ways of doing it. You could find some bit of memory which we've either already implemented and just trash out, which is nearby,
Yeah, I think it's definitely easier to like look at it from the caller instead of the function itself.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually one of the reasons why on Windows, all Windows DLLs have a little bit of memory right at the start of every function, so that in the update mechanism, they can overwrite that bit of memory so it can jump to somewhere else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just space. Like space is tight now while doing the disassembly.
Mm-hmm. Well, the other option will be just to run it in some debugger, like either this IDA or the other one which you mentioned. So